Hi guys, welcome to the Earthy Delights podcast. And we hope you are well. Today we have a special guest on, a expert in happiness called Christopher Boyce, who has been studying the intangible happiness for many years now, and has also traveled around the world on his bike, experiencing a multitude of different feelings. So without further ado, Christopher, how are you doing? What's the crack?
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me on. Good to be here. I guess a little bit nervous, doing this podcast and stuff, but it's, really great opportunity to kind of share what's going on and just get my
Yeah.
ideas around happiness and whatnot. I guess it's kind of a little bit of difficult times, really. I mean, with coronavirus and the lockdown, I mean, when it all came and kicked off, I was still running around on a bicycle, so I didn't really have a permanent place. But fortunately, there's a lot of good souls out there who are willing to kind of help me. So I'm staying with a friend and, very small flat, but we're kind of finding our way. And hey, it's an opportunity for, whatever. Kind of ups and downs, but
Yeah.
generally okay. Keeping my head above.
That's good to
Good to
hear.
hear.
I just want to before we get started with the important questions, what entails that? What makes a happiness expert? What does that actually mean to people who are listening who have no idea what that means? How do you become a happiness expert like yourself?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we all are experts, aren't we, in our own way? I mean, we all have a sense of what happiness is. Like, I wouldn't call myself an expert. I guess I've done certain things. I mean, that give me a kind of certain perspective on things. I mean, I spent like over a decade doing pretty hardcore research on the subject. What are the things that contribute to a happy, meaningful life? But then I also decided to hop on my bike and spend 18 months cycling to a place called Bhutan, which is well famous for its like national focus on happiness. So I don't know anyone who's done that. I guess I'm an expert at cycling to Bhutan. But yeah, I guess I've considered it a lot. It's part of my profession, I guess. Not that I could really say I have much of a profession these days. I mean, I just guess I live it and breathe it. But I mean, who doesn't really? Hey?
Yeah.
Christopher, could you talk me through your years when you were researching, and then how did the idea of leaving the research and cycling to Bhutan, how did that come about, and what were you feeling just before you left? As in, was there a certain day where you thought, I have to leave now, or was it a growing feeling? Or talk to me about that.
Yeah, it was a slow building. It was a slow building process. I mean, I got into the game, if you like, got into researching happiness. As an economist, and I was like, oh wow, what is it about our lives that do bring happiness? And I produced a lot of really good research on it, and I was doing well at my job. But knowing about happiness and researching happiness is very different from actually applying and living happiness. And I just guess I kind of felt a growing discord between what I was learning and researching and my actual life. And I am looking at the world going, wow, I know what to do, but why am I not doing it? And I guess what it kind of dawned on me is just that, yeah, the structures aren't really in place for me to be able to make those choices. I don't have the time in which I could spend on myself and with the people I most love. And I guess what I needed to do is I realized I couldn't be happy in the job I was doing. So the irony of an unhappy happiness researcher. And I was like, I need to find a different way. And I guess this was slowly building. And what I noticed is I was actually quite good at my job. And I published really well. One of the first papers I ever wrote actually is where just finding out whether promotion brought us better health. And I found that it didn't. If anything, it made us kind of a little bit more stressed. So what I tried to do is apply what I could to my research, and I didn't stretch beyond myself to try and get the promotion. I was like, well, I'm doing okay. Life is good, and I guess what I found as I became more productive and efficient at doing the things I did, so I could start getting away with more stuff because I had a lot more capacity to do it and exploring happiness in my own life. But I guess I came to that limit because in the academic world, pretty much like most professional working worlds, is that you are expected to do things and deliver certain outputs, and if you're not doing them, then people start asking questions. So I was still constrained, and I just felt like, okay, I need to actually create a life for myself where I'm not constrained. And I guess I ultimately decided I need to leave the work I was doing and set out on a journey. Which went a lot deeper than I thought it would actually.
Thanks for that, Christopher. And so I get the impression that you are, well, from what I understand, is you're saying that you necessarily didn't feel like you had the time or freedom to fully embody the things that you were learning about happiness.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I think it's difficult for anyone. I mean, like, this is why I said we're all experts at happiness, because, deep down, we know what's important for our happiness. Yet we're sort of unable to always do those things. And we can kind of sort of self-blame ourselves and stuff, but there's also an environment out there which is not structured to bring about happiness. It is in a way, kind of loosely, but the fundamental drive of our societies, and this is what I was researching, is that the economic fundamentals. We've got to keep growing that economy. And at one point in human history, that was quite beneficial in terms of raising people's well-being and happiness. And certainly in the UK, we've long reached that point. If we keep focusing on that, then that's what takes priority. So the things and the way the society is arranged will encourage us to do certain things that kind of meet someone's profit incentives or whatever. And I found that difficult, and I could see those things, and I think most people are aware of those things, but we find it difficult to make those choices.
Do you think that there's a way to reconcile the seeming disconnect between the way we are living and working and what we all want to have or achieve?
Yeah, I think there is. I think for me, it's been about a process of getting in touch with the deeper human needs. And realize that there's a multitude of ways to meet those needs. So my need for connection in this day and age, you get a mobile phone and you're on all the apps to connect with people. And that serves something, but it also leaves me a little bit wanting, because what I really love is to sit with someone face to face over a cup of tea. Ideally, there might be a fire involved and a little bit of outdoors, and that fulfills my need for human connection. But when there's the economics and stuff involved, then we're incentivized to chat and communicate in this way. So if you get to the core deep need, which is for human connection, we realize that we don't need that thing to meet the need. We just need to recognize the need and see that there's multitude ways of meeting it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get you. And do you think if people really interrogated what their needs were, that they could pursue these needs without it impacting on how they are currently living, i.e. like they still need to work 40 hours a week, or in many cases more, or they still need to do this, or they still are under pressure to do this because of the society that they live in? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's a stuckness. There's a certain stuckness to seeing beyond what we're in, and how we make those shifts. I mean, the thing is, the reason that we live the way we live is because it supports something. Provides a little bit of safety. I don't have to do anything too challenging, which is perfectly legitimate. It's difficult to go against those kind of contested things and not have that phone and be on that application to communicate with people, because that's where everyone is.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to really step outside of those things. And I guess my own choice was to really step out of it. And I guess I was implementing certain little shifts in my life as I was, learning more and more about happiness. And overall, they brought a little bit of a stretch. There are little changes that we can make. Just a simple question: do I really need that thing? What need is it meeting? And actually, is that the cost of that thing really worth the number of hours I have to put in at work? Sometimes we go, yes, it is, and that's totally legitimate. And sometimes we'll think, oh, no, it's not. We may still get it anyway, but if it's not, then we go, okay, maybe I don't need that, regardless of the pressures that I may be experiencing from what everyone else has, as well as what if we have children, what the children would like. We can still try and find some kind of decision, but at the same time, we still need to battle against it. There's an environment out there which is encouraging us to consume these things, to meet these needs in these certain ways. So it's really difficult. And if we can find a way, then try and find that way. But it's difficult, I think.
And you bring up that point, and it brought something to mind straight away. I spent a little bit of time after my first year at university, volunteering at a orphanage in the southern state Kerala of India, and some of the kids there had, as you can imagine, in an Indian orphanage, had really horrible backstories, and were left in complete poverty, and there was kind of no way out for them. And yet, despite all of this and their personal tragedies, they seemed to me and to be the happiest kids that I'd ever actually met. And I remember when we were going out there, went out there with my girlfriend, and when we went out there, it kind of all happened last minute, and we were in the airport, and we realized we hadn't got anything for the kids, so we went quickly and we got a massive bag of Haribos. And so when we arrived, it wasn't much, but we just we opened the Haribos and gave it to them, which is a sensory experience I don't think they'd ever experienced before. But what they did is they got one Haribo, took it out, and then passed it around, and then they would just suck on their individual Haribo for as long as they could, and then they would gently nibble at it before it would all before they finished. And then later on we did an arts and crafts kind of week with them, and so we went out into the local village and we got some balloons and some other bits and bobs, and we gave them the balloons. And 3 weeks later, the kids were still playing with the balloons. And when invariably they would pop every now and again, you could really see the sadness on these kids' faces. And it kind of struck me, because I thought, see, if you did that to a child in the UK, or in the Western world, let's just say, they might be happy with the balloon for 30 minutes, maybe an hour max, but after that they'd get bored. And then I extrapolated and I thought, well, yeah, but I'm the same, because if I get a new iPhone after 6 months, I'm already thinking about the newest iPhone that's going to come out later, which is going to cost me $1,000. And every now and again I try to keep it in check and try to keep that memory alive of what these kids who had nothing, how happy they were with the simplest of things. But how can we do that in a, you were a former economist, how can we do that in a country, in a society that really is all about consumption, it's all about capitalism, it's all about moving on to the next thing, because the next thing invokes a sense of status. If I have a Ford, that's great, but if I have a Merc, that's even better, because people are going to look at me a different way. How do we do that on a day-to-day level, without having to go to an orphanage in India to experience that?
So you're using that memory to try and curtail or manage that continuous need for wanting and expecting more from stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really useful experience to have that and hold that. How do we? I mean, so I guess like a lot of these needs and expectations are coming from somewhere, and we can look at ourselves and think we really need these things, but also, our needs and our preferences are managed because it's in the interests of certain people, including ourselves. We all want to consume, we want our friends to consume, and it's all good for business, and we like these things. But it sounds to me like you're getting to like the bare basics of things, where people are really enjoying things as they are. I mean, kids are amazing. And I connect a lot to my, so you connect to that situation in Kerala, South India. But I connect a lot to my own childlike self. And even like the fact that a child could play with a balloon for 30 minutes is amazingly inspiring, right? Because it's just a balloon, it's just a thing. But children are amazingly creative and joyful beings. And I guess what I do is I kind of connect back to my kind of childlike self, and just that ease at which I could find joy and excitement in pretty much anything. I'd also find myself, experiencing difficulty as well. But I guess it's more kind of being in touch with that kind of emotional space, which I find really rejuvenates me, and keeps me in contact with like the kind of joyful sort of happiness. And then the kind of other thing I was kind of getting from what you're expressing, maybe I'm going a little bit off tangent here, but it's just in terms of like the happiness, or what kind of happiness we're experiencing. Because I think what you're talking there about, the children that you met in the school, is a certain kind of happiness in the moment, which actually makes people, well, sometimes when we go to different places across the world, we kind of have this notion of like, wow, people are really happy here in a way that we're not. It's it's a different type of happiness. And I don't think we should, romanticize the notion in some senses that the people in abjectly appalling conditions are happy. They'll still smile and they'll make the best of things. And what we find is that, you look across the world, you know, there are some places in the world where people smile and laugh a lot more than we do in the UK, and that's really important. But then, in the UK, what I kind of sense is it's more of we think we're happy rather than we feel we're happy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more of a kind of satisfaction based type of happiness. So when I think about my life, I think I've done and achieved all the things I want to. And what I kind of find is that there's, if we can kind of sort of manipulate that kind of satisfaction aspect of things and keep people slightly dissatisfied, then they'll keep wanting that satisfaction. That doesn't mean that they can't be happy and smiling throughout their day. But I guess it's useful to kind of bear that in mind, I suppose, when we're buying that thing, such as you mentioned, like the iPhone, is that, that's the thing I think I should have, and you'll get it. Yeah. And there might be a little bit of joy and pleasure in it, but, after a very short while, you're thinking about the next iPhone and how that might satisfy you. And, again, you'll go through that process. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that process. I mean, it's slightly part and parcel of the environment that we've co-created. But I guess what I kind of always feel is just like having the awareness of it really is really important. And it sounds to me like that experience that you had is a real something that holds you in your own process.
Yeah, for sure.
And just exploring and understanding these things. And like I say, for me, it's connecting to my own childlike self, or any child, when I see the magic of what it means to be alive. Not always, because, sometimes it is a struggle. Childhood can be a difficult time as well. But it's also the time where we do actually really feel our emotions. And that's really important.
Yeah, I often get the impression that we're almost encouraged to consume or distract ourselves when we are feeling some sort of negative emotion, like you said, like when we're dissatisfied, if we consume or distract ourselves with this, we might feel better. I was wondering, do you think by avoiding negative actions to distraction, do you think we're also numbing our access to positive emotions?
Yeah, I say so. I guess this is more my own process, like growing up, of just like, don't cry. People not wanting to see my negative emotions. We're not very good at dealing with the negative emotions in ourselves and other people. And when I think back to my child self, like, it was okay to cry because that's, how I was feeling. And somewhere along the line, it kind of became unacceptable, and you started concealing those negative emotions, and almost trying to escape them. And I don't know. I mean, is it possible to switch off half of ourselves and just feel the good stuff that people want to see? Sometimes we can, but we're often not being very truthful to ourselves when, sometimes we just want to cry or feel grief. It's really difficult. I know my own experience has been certain avoidance, and I still do it. I still do it to this day, but, a lot less than I used to, certainly.
I've heard a few times, I don't know if you know Gabor Mate, but he mentions how you'll never meet a baby who's disconnected from itself, like its feelings. Like if a baby is hungry, you're going to find out very soon. Or if a baby is unhappy, you're going to find out very soon. And he said it's like sometimes I feel like it's almost we've been taught to not to like create a bigger and bigger distance between our feelings and our reactions or our emotions.
Yeah, I certainly see that disconnection between the thinking and feeling. Yeah, no, I certainly resonates with me.
Christopher, is it you talk about the disconnection and the UK, and I think obviously I'm half Italian. I've moved out to Madrid 2 or 3 years ago now, and so that culture contrast is quite apparent between the Latin Mediterranean based culture and the UK culture. stereotypically, just generally being quite cold. But I also think about how in the UK as well, we have to temper, success has to be tempered, and happiness. No one in the UK, at least in my experience anyway, no one kind of likes to see someone overly happy, or because we kind of get this notion that they're almost bragging about it, they're showing off, right? That they should everything should be kept in moderation, whether it's happiness or whether it's despair. It should all kind of be kept in moderation. And I know that I saw that you wrote an article about called Felicidad en España. And you're talking about like the happiness in Spain. And I was wondering about, during your travels, how you think that cultures that allow people just to be more expressive, I think we're aware that especially Mediterranean cultures are a lot more expressive, whether they're upset at you or whether they're really happy, they'll smother you in hugs and kisses and all sorts. And that's both on the men's side and on the women's side. It's not just solely women that are allowed to do that. And I was wondering if on your travels you've seen more cultures, maybe in Bhutan and other areas around there, that where they are allowed to be more expressive, both happy with the happy or if they're despairing, and that whether you think that kind of that contrast, because I don't know of any other cultures really that want us to temper happiness. In England, I think it's a real thing that no one wants to see someone that's always happy, always talking about how great their life is, because it can come across as quite almost narcissistic, almost kind of they don't care about anyone else's feelings, which is something that is really odd to me.
Yeah, showing our feelings to others is challenging. I guess it kind of, displaying a kind of certain sense of happiness or sadness, it kind of puts you in a very vulnerable space. It's something that people can attack, essentially, I feel. I think it's beautiful to see people in joyous states, because it infects me. It's contagious. But then if we're not particularly happy ourselves and we see that, then we want to, crush that, or we might feel jealous about it. And we don't have a very good way of able to contain that emotional space, which I think part and parcel, as we talked about earlier, is like pushing away the negative, but also not really embracing the positive. I guess it's like we don't really appreciate these things until we start experiencing other cultures and how things are different. And I don't want to say, any culture is better than another or whatever, and it's just different. And I think through that interaction and experience of other cultures and celebrating our experiences in other cultures and really getting to grips with them can really help, us understand ourselves. I wouldn't understand all the stuff about emotions unless I spent a lot of time in different situations with different types of people in different cultures. And I certainly felt like when I was cycling through Latin America, I just felt almost like being a famous person. Every time you cycle through a place, people want to invite you in, and there's no inhibitions about it. It's just what you do. And then what I noticed in me every time that happened is that I would start getting really fearful, right? And just like, what's this? Maybe this isn't what I think it's going to be. Maybe I'm in danger. Maybe there's something. And it's like that judging, fearful mind. And eventually you see that so many times. And I think it's that kind of more anxiety thinking based judgment is something times actively encouraged from my own cultural experience. It's just like, wow, let that go with it, because actually this is a wonderful, beautiful opportunity for connection. And I guess kind of through that process, like, and just deepening in and just letting it go and going with the moment, being more present focused, and certainly tapping into my emotions, both positive and negative, using them as indicators. I guess what you were talking about earlier, I was thinking that idea of the child at Gabor Mate saying that there's that this feeling being is that actually they're wonderful indicators, whether they're positive or negative. So rather than like feeling like I needed to react, I just go with it and just flow, and ended up having so many beautiful experiences with people all across the world. And I guess what I kind of realized is like, wow, the beautiful power of giving a gift and enabling other people to give to one another. And I realized that I was able to do that. And human beings, no matter culture, really like to help other human beings. But what I found in Latin America is that it felt like it was just a lot more opportunities, and people were a lot more responsive to a stranger on a bicycle. than places that I'm more familiar with. But having deepened into myself and knowing what it means and takes to be present and allow people space to be themselves, actually the gifts still can't come in. People are still responsive. So it's like holding open those emotions, positive and the negative, and being vulnerable about it and not being afraid to be scared can really invite interesting interactions no matter where we are. Although, culturally it can sometimes be more struggle. I guess is my experience. Did that answer your question? I kind of went off on there.
Yeah, no, it did. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's just, that's what I think as well, experiencing different cultures, like you said, none are better or worse. They're just different in every way. And I think the thing that I've most benefited from in my short life is just traveling as much as I have, and kind of picking up on those different cultures and the different kind of, nuances that they all have, and just trying to kind of cherry pick from one to the other. It's not that I dislike the UK or the British culture whatsoever. There's some of it, parts of it that I absolutely love, but I just kind of try to leave the other parts that I don't really agree with at the door and take some of it and adopt some from other cultures. That's my kind of philosophy.
Definitely.
Really,
I guess what that's kind of stirring up is that it is quite nice to implant ourselves in a culture and really suck that up and learn something about ourselves. But I guess as I've kind of traveled more and more, I'm more aware of the nuances that just change from just going from one side of a city to another city. And there's still that deep potential for learning that can happen in terms of what we can inspire ourselves to be, I suppose.
Christopher, you mentioned in one of your blog posts how you have that you thought or you noticed that a lot of your anxieties were actually not yours and that they were other people's anxieties and that you've kind of adopted them. Could you expand on this realization? Because I really felt the same. When I was reading this, I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was a curious one. I guess it dawned on me this time. I was cycling on my bike, and when you're cycling around the world on a bicycle and you've just got all your kit with you, you set up a home wherever you want. It's a pretty scary, vulnerable place to be in, and sometimes you just don't feel like camping. I'm quite an anxious, prone kind of guy. I just watch it and deal with it, and kind of try and base my experiences more in the body. So it's like, do I have a real need to be scared here? Is this a scary place, or is it just in my mind? And I guess on a bicycle, there's some days when you just feel a little bit like, ooh. And I remember there's this one day I'm cycling around and I was convinced I was going to camp that night, just free camping, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And after lunch, I noticed I was feeling a little bit like, oh, really fearful and scared, more than I otherwise should have been. And something seemed to have shifted. And what I noticed is that actually, when I stopped, I'd spoken to this woman who was a really nice, pleasant, friendly woman. And, at the end, she looked at me very sternly and was like, take care. There's a lot of bad people out there. And I suddenly realized, and just remembering that, it's just like, wow, okay, that's somehow transferred onto me. And as soon as I realized that, I kind of let it go. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's her fear. And I picked up on that and gone, yeah, okay, I should be scared here, apparently. And I just kind of moved it away. The fear was still there. The voice of her was still there. But I realized it wasn't really my fear. And I guess what I kind of realized is that, whenever we go somewhere or do something, people tell us things about that they've read, or a friend of mine had this experience happen to them, or if you do that, don't go there. And really, that's just someone else's fear. And once I separated that from myself, I just thought, okay, it's not mine. So if it's not mine, I'll just keep listening to my body, and when there's something really scary that's in front of me, I'll get the hell out as best I can.
Yeah.
But most of the time, wow, it wasn't really my fear. I guess I experienced that the most when I was in Mexico. Lots of people, just next to the US, and the US, fairly fear-based society, I would say. It's their next door neighbors, and they hear tons of news about how terrible Mexico is. So so the news is propagating a little bit of that fear as well as each other. So you hear a lot of stories about Mexico, which is a big country. Of course, things happen; they happen anywhere. So I guess it kind of dawned on me a little bit around that. And
yeah, I remember having the exact same
Mm.
experience. I spent some time in Peru and in Mexico. And I remember whenever I talked to people, particularly maybe a bit older than my friends, but sometimes my friends also, and they would say, "Oh, Jesus, were you not nervous? Like, isn't that place a bit crazy?" And all these kind of things. And then I realized, like, when I was on the ground, like when I was just there, I didn't feel the fear that was being projected on by all these people. I mean, yeah, there were some situations that maybe I wouldn't have seen before. But yeah, it was kind of, I had something similar where I kind of made the conscious decision to actually just live by my own experience rather than somebody else's like fear and not even experience. Like,
Mm.
yeah, it was an important differentiation.
Lived
Yeah.
experience, right? What we're experiencing and tuning into that, which I guess, like when I'm not in contact and not present with my emotions and stuff, I forget about that. And I'm too in my mind thinking about what, John or whoever said about this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really, really important.
Big time.
And Jim, I remember when I came to visit you in Dublin, and you were taking me kind of around a bit of a walk, and you're going, "Oh, this is like the dangerous part." I can't remember the name exactly. Maybe Crumlin, but I don't want to do Crumlin a disservice if it wasn't Crumlin. But you were taking me around parts of Dublin. And you're like, "Oh, these are quite dangerous parts, and this is this, and blah blah." I think people also forget that they actually experience, especially when talking about danger, they experience it all the time in their daily lives, but we just get used to it. So if it's a Londoner, they might, or a Dubliner or whatever, they might experience really dangerous areas, but they're so used to them that to them they're no longer dangerous. But then all of a sudden they fly out to Mexico, and it's like, oh, the minute I get off this plane, I'm going to get shot and stabbed. It's like, well, there's no reason for that to happen. Obviously, kind of keep your wits about you, but like you're both saying, just kind of live it through your own experience, and take what you've learned from your own life kind of forward with you. It's not like none of us have grown up in castles, gated castles with security guards all around. We've all kind of experienced it from one time to another. But I think we get so comfortable with our own home experiences, that anything foreign can seem scary, even if there's no danger there whatsoever. Just the fact that someone's speaking a different language or they look different to you
Mm.
can kind of alienate yourselves. I remember when I went to India, I traveled around a lot, but we went to Kerala. And we went to this little village. Louisa and I were the only white people there. And it's the first time that I'd gone to a country where I couldn't speak any lingo whatsoever. And that just scared me alone. Just that there was no kind of home comforts for me. Nothing. Everything they did was completely foreign. They ate with, their hands to the fork and knife. And it had to be one hand in particular. The way they dressed was different. Everything that I took for normal, for granted in England and in the Western culture was different in India, and that alone scared me. And then you kind of realize, actually, I mean, in general, the Indians that I kind of met with, some of the nicest people I'd ever met, and were so friendly. But just that kind of initial shock factor what scared me more than anything. You know what I mean?
Mm.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Christopher, I wanted to ask you about whether or not we should be actually searching for happiness rather than contentness. Because for me, my belief around happiness is, you mentioned like there are different types of happiness, but for me, happiness is generally just kind of like a fleeting emotion, kind of like all emotions. Whereas contentness for me is more of like a groundedness, the regardless of a situation which people would call good or bad happening, that you still have this kind of grounded contentness that, okay, no, I'm okay with this situation.
Mm. Yeah, there
Do you,
are different types of happiness, and I think it's important to kind of clarify a little bit around that, because for some people, happiness will mean contentment, and for other people, contentment will mean happiness. They're kind of the same thing, and I guess there's what I've found when talking about happiness. Like, I don't really like the word happiness, but it's a word that really connects people, and people get it, and at least they're interested. Um, but we don't always have a shared understanding of what we're talking about.
yeah,
And it's not like I'll use the word happiness to get people interested, and we're chatting, and that's cool. And if it goes deeper, we can start talking about the different types of happiness and whether we should try and pursue happiness or not. But it's a really valid question. So the kind of fleeting feelings for me, like the happiness, it's a kind of like a hedonic sense of happiness. It's
yeah,
like ups and downs. Chasing that kind of happiness. Yeah, I mean, you can keep chasing the highs, but eventually those highs, become not as high as they once were, or can even
Mm.
turn into some kind of addiction or something like this.
Yeah.
Whereas contentment, I mean, that kind of, it's a type of happiness, I suppose. There's another two form of happiness. One I mentioned is kind of almost like a thinking type of happiness,
Mm-hmm.
where we evaluate our lives. So, am I satisfied? You might say that's quite similar to contentment, and I think there's some elements of creating dissatisfaction so that we continuously stay on this treadmill.
Mm.
But what for me feels like the happiness that I feel is the most valuable in my life and I live by is kind of Aristotle and a kind of Greek philosopher kind of differentiate happiness between the hedonic type of happiness and what he called eudaimonic type of happiness. And what that was living in line with cultural values of the time, which in his day was like virtues such as like courage and bravery and stuff like that, and living a moral life and so on. But now it's kind of more conceived as that idea of a human thriving or human flourishing. And that kind of consists more of like a connectedness, meaningful existence, and I guess freedom, if you like. And that's what I try and live my life by, which for me incorporates element of contentment. It also incorporates elements of satisfaction, and it also, to an extent, creates a hedonic experience as well, because it's feeling happy is part of it in the moment, but I also think that feeling sad is also part of happiness,
Yeah.
and appreciating that emotional experience and using that emotional experience to indicate what we should do. If we lose a loved one, maybe a loved one dies or something, it's pretty normal to feel sad about that,
Mm-hmm.
and to be sad and to grieve over that, rather than thinking this is not how I should be feeling. And I think there's an element of chasing that high in that hedonic sense, whereas we can still claim to be happy, yet you're still dealing with the loss of a loved one, for example. Does that make sense? Does that
Yeah.
answer?
No, I understand. And could you tell us about the things that you learned on your trip, which you may have not believed or thought before the trip, and how have you tried to implement what you've learned now that you've returned? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The things about happiness, right, is that I kind of think that we know this deep down. We know what we need, but we've forgotten somewhere, by whatever the conditioning of our society or whatever. So the things that I learned, I mean, I kind of knew already, but I guess it was
Mm.
more of a deeper, and I researched a lot of this as well, but I guess it was more of a deeper experiential process that I went through. And I guess there was kind of three things that come to mind when I think about, what are the really valuable things that I learned on the journey. And the first of those, I kind of already briefly mentioned, that was allowing other people to give is one of the best gifts we can give, if you like. So receiving gift. And what I find with that is that really creates really deep, meaningful connections with other people, because someone offers us something and we can say no. And where does it go from there? And I'm not saying we need to say yes to everything just to create connection, but it enables someone to go, yeah, I'll receive that gift. And, it's not a question of giving something back, it's just receiving, and then creates a connection. The other learning, I guess, I found is that, I guess, something like taking the time. No, I guess, no, the other learning would be, as I've already briefly mentioned today, is like that fear and anxiety and where that comes from. Um, Maybe from other people and what we do with it. So what we do with it, we can be quite reactive to it. Oh, I feel scared, therefore I'm not going to do that. And I guess the final thing is like just more awareness, taking the time. As I see it, the world is in chaos. It always is. It's a kind of continual, evolving, flowing thing. And most of the time, it doesn't make sense. And in that anxiety, in that pain and anguish, we're rushing around trying to what we might call fix it. And actually, have we really sat down and taken the time to understand what the issue is and what our deeper needs are? And I guess I realized that I haven't and I don't. So I guess what it invites me to do is just to take my time and really listen to myself and act when I know what I need to do from a very deep place, rather than going, oh, I need to do lots of things and then doing them and realizing they weren't the right things. So I guess a little bit of slowing down. Um, and
Mm.
I guess I could base a lot of those in the research, but also not. And I guess when I came back, I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And what I started noticing is all those things coming back from my kind of cultural history coming back to me. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I've got to find a job now. I've got to, get back into society. Oh, people don't give here. People are, individualistic. They don't want to come together. And I was like, wow, you're feeding into that anxiety, Christopher. Relax.
Yeah.
And I guess when I first came back, I was, very anxious. But instead of doing the things to make myself feel safe, which is have a house, get a job, and stuff like that, I realized I didn't need to do those things. So what I did is I essentially stayed on my bicycle and just floated around, having conversations with people, trying to feel into what I needed to do next. Incidentally, I still haven't figured out what I need to do next. But I guess I'm still taking my time over that, and then
Yeah, you're not rushing in, and you're not being
yeah. I mean, I've decided at the
encouraged.
moment I've pretty much nearly written a first draft of a book based on my journey,
Oh
and
yes.
I didn't start that as soon as I came back. People were like, "Oh, it's an interesting story. You should write a book." And I'm like, "Yeah, but is that what I need to do?" And it was only 6 months after I got back, I suddenly connected with that. It's like, yeah, that's something
Interesting.
that I need to do, and it will help me in and of itself. It doesn't matter whether anyone reads it. Is that it's also a process in which I can really connect and understand more about my journey. So I'm coming to the end of that. Very strange situation that we're all in at the moment in under lockdown, and that is what it is. So yeah, I'm staying with a friend, and I don't know what will happen, and I can get really scared and anxious about it. But at the same time, breathe. Things that are really important for my happiness is like being surrounded by loved ones, having care and consideration for other people, meeting loads of people on Zoom these days. Um, Also, having a space. There's a lot in my life that I can connect to and let go. There's not things I need to do. Yes, it would be nice to have a job and getting some income, but I'm okay for now. And rather than worrying about that, which will be a problem when I run out of money in a year's time, say, I'll worry about that when I'm actually faced with the situation. And I'm a pretty resourceful guy. I'll get a job, whatever.
Mm.
Something will come along. So I guess, yeah, breathing into it really. And when I came back, that's kind of what I did. And,
So many things come to mind, Christopher. Right? So two or three things that I'd like to say in response to all this. One, I resonate deeply with the first point you make, because I remember like kind of often growing up around my friends, many of my friends, not wanting to ask people for something or not wanting to accept something from somebody because, oh yeah, no, I don't want to burden them, or I don't want to, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like, no, I want to be fully independent. And I actually listened to a podcast that was an economist talking about research behind this exact point, how actually when you allow yourself to receive gifts, whether that's a meal, whether it's a house, as in like a housing, a boarding, whether it's even small gestures, that really improves the connection between people and highlights the interconnectedness of it, rather than, I think we're encouraged to believe that we're totally independent and no, I don't want to ask him for this. I can do this on my own, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do this.
we believe we are, and that's how we want to be seen to be as well. Because
Yeah,
you can't rely
yeah,
on people; that's weak.
yeah. That's it. Yeah.
It's difficult for anyone to get through that. And I
Mm.
guess I've in my journey, what I did is I kind of shifted through that. But yeah, anyway, so you were saying you noticed that around your friends. I cut you off there.
For
Sorry.
sure, for sure. And I'm even hearing like thoughts sometimes when I do accept gifts, like some part of me saying like, "Ah, oh, you shouldn't do this. You should be doing this on your own," or whatever, whatever. But like you said, I often feel like we do know these things, and we just kind of have to quiet the like cultural background that has like given rise to all these thoughts, and kind of just go, "Oh no, this is another person who cares about me, that wants to help me. Why wouldn't I accept this?" And I would do the exact same if I could. and I may do in the future.
Yeah, people
Um,
want to help. People care and they want to help. So when they give us something, because they care, and also when they tell us, oh, be careful. There's lots of frightening places. It's because they care. But rather than say,
yeah,
hey, I care about you, we kind of,
yeah.
we say, oh, be careful. You're like, okay,
uh,
yeah, you know.
that's
So I'm
true.
glad it resonates.
No, for sure. The second thing that came to mind was how you mentioned how we are also encouraged to kind of, oh, if there's an issue, all right, stand up and just start working or start doing something, because that's the best way to go about it. And then I saw in one of your blog posts that you quoted the Alan Watts quote. I'll just read it out, which says, "As muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone, it could be argued that those who sit quietly and do nothing are making one of the best possible contributions to a world in turmoil." Now, I know a lot of people will read that and think that's absolute nonsense, but could you expand, or could you tell us about your thoughts behind this quote?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading his book as I was writing, um, and I guess I've looked at how I've tried to do lots of things. And so as I was an academic, like I was trying to like really push and promote happiness because it's a really important thing. But actually, I wasn't taking stock of who I was and what I had to contribute and bring to this research area. I mean, I still had a lot of things going on in my life, and I guess I felt like I needed to sit more carefully, really, and work out where I'm best used. I mean, I was writing lots of academic papers, but is that really the best use of me? I mean, what I thought is, the reason I got into academia is because, like anyone, I wanted to create a happier world. That's a really important thing. How can I best do that? And I felt as an academic. What I didn't realize is I didn't connect with that grander purpose. I thought to do that, I had to be an academic. And I guess by letting go of that, I need to be an academic, I realized I could meet that need in other ways. And what was better for me is if I understood what my gifts were, um, and gave them to the world that way. Because, yeah, I can do maths and I can do stats and I can write academic papers. But not many people want to read academic papers about happiness.
Yeah.
But they're more likely to follow a guy riding around the world to get to Bhutan. So I'm like, oh, maybe that's a better use of me. Admittedly, I couldn't have done that probably, and it wouldn't have been as interesting if I hadn't had the academic experience in the first place. And then I guess just on the bicycle, taking my time, being willing to stop and take in the scenery rather than feeling like I had to rush to get to the next place because of achieving some objective, like getting to Bhutan. It wasn't actually really important that I ever got to Bhutan. I didn't realize that a lot of the time, but it came from lots of time on the bicycle and going, yeah, okay, I just need to be here, present. And I guess I think a lot about it when I'm thinking about political problems or environmental problems that we suffer. And it's not to say these issues are not problematic and that there aren't a lot of people doing good things. But I think a lot of actions are well intentioned, but often acting out of not really knowing themselves and also the situation. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's doing what they can. But I guess, hey, if we all stopped and paused, as we're having to do in this very unique situation, being locked down, maybe it gives scope to solve the problems that have been bothering us for such a long time. I can think of like homelessness. I've read articles about that being almost like solved in recent weeks because not people. I don't know how that is. I'm not in a place where there's people on the streets, but I've read some articles that people have been put up in hotels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is that true? I don't know.
Chris, yeah. They've kind of, I think I read yesterday 90% of homelessness, people who are sleeping on the streets have now found a temporary kind of roof over their heads. So it just goes to show where there's a will, there's a way.
So this slowing down, right? I mean, we're slowing down.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, and there's a lot of hardships and struggle through this, definitely. But we're slowing down. Do we get to think about things and what's really important to us in a different way? And hopefully, people might have time to listen to more podcasts and listen to this one, for example, and go, yeah, Christopher's onto something, or not.
Yeah, we hope so. Because you spoke about your academic kind of research, and I just wanted to touch on that because there's part of me that's I've always you see these the rankings and these country rankings of the happiest countries and so on. And I've always wondered how they calculate that, because like you said, people have so many different definitions of happiness, and according to those definitions their happiness will be different. If someone's happiness is defined as contentment or satisfaction, that's a lot more different to someone who defines it as those fleeting moments of euphoria. So just wanted to kind of just touch on that, someone who has kind of been in the field and studied and spent a lot of years in the field. How is it that these countries are actually ranked, and why is it that the Nordic countries, Norway, Denmark, why do they always seem to be the top ranking countries in terms of the happiness index?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a really important, interesting question. So I kind of mentioned previously that you kind of got vaguely three types of happiness. What I call the hedonic happiness, which is the kind of emotional feelings, ups and downs. You've got what I'd call like an evaluative happiness, which is like the satisfaction. I'm satisfied with my life when I think about my life, essentially. And then you have what I call the eudaimonic type of happiness, which is more, if you like, the human flourishing type of happiness. So what those league how we understand people's happiness is we basically ask people questions. So how happy do you feel in this moment, right? How excited do you feel in this moment? So kind of positive emotions in the moment, right? And we ask people to rate that on a scale from 0 to 10, for example. For something like the evaluative happiness, we might ask someone like how satisfied you are with your life, or on a ladder from 0 to 10 in terms of the best possible life versus the worst possible life, what would you give yourself? Or you have the more the human flourishing type of happiness, which might link to something like how meaningful or worthwhile do you feel like the things you do in your life are. So there are three very different types of happiness, and what the happiness league tables concentrates on. And also, so there's different elements of life that feed into different types of happiness. There's a good chance that if you're happy on one of those, you'll be happy on all of them. But there's also not, right? So,
okay.
What the happiness league tables that we come out each year are based on the evaluative type of happiness, which is the satisfaction with life, or how high you are on a ladder from 0 to 10. Right. What we know about these types of happiness is that it tends to conform with kind of cultural expectations. So, it's not always if you have a lot of stuff, but there is some correlation. So if you have a lot of stuff and you've achieved the things that you're supposed to achieve, then you do well or do better on this type of happiness, right? But so you could have this really high status job and it'd be great, but that doesn't actually mean you're experiencing or feeling happiness throughout your day. So you might actually answer the question of how happy are you now a lot lower than other places. So what this is, what I kind of have a bit of beef about these kind of league tables is what it does is it conforms, if you like, to societal norms of what the kind of cultural expectations are, which is all well and good. They can really contribute to our well-being, but sometimes those things are not what we really need. They're just what we think we need. And if we don't have them, we're dissatisfied. So certain countries do well at that because on the whole, they're an economically advanced country and they tend to have a certain stability in their society, therefore they do well. Now, if you look at the first question, such as how happy are you in the moment, right? It's actually Latin American countries that completely outstrip other countries, right? So that's not to say that the UK does particularly badly or Scandinavian countries do badly, but Finland has been consistently ranked the highest, most satisfied country on a 0 to 10 scale, right? In terms of averages across the citizens. But in terms of how happy people feel in the moment, how much they smile or laugh, they're actually ranked 41st, right? So it's kind of, it's not that much behind Latin American countries because the differential is not so large. But there is a difference in the type of happiness. And what I think is why that the happiness, the evaluative happiness is used is because it kind of fits, what we like to believe is important for life, But I also think it's important to have both. So laughing and smiling every day. So a country like Costa Rica, for example, known for its pura vida, the simple life. We don't have much, but we're happy. Have a third of or a fifth of the income that somewhere like the USA has, but has higher happiness levels in terms of moment to moment, and also evaluate their life in terms of happiness much higher as well than the USA, and that's quite stark and interesting. And that's why I think is interesting when you've got countries that are actually doing well at both. But then that's not me even mentioning the idea of meaning and purpose, which is the third type of happiness, which is how I try to live my life. And if you like, so a country like Bhutan, sorry, I'm going off on one here. I don't know.
No. It's really interesting.
So a country like Bhutan, the way they measure happiness there for a country is more in line with what you might call a eudaimonic type of happiness or a flourishing type of happiness. And incidentally, they don't do very well on the evaluative type of happiness. They come like 85th or something, which for a country that focuses its national policy around happiness might cause people to go, well, that's not very good, is it? But it misses the point, because it's a little bit of a fluffy, not too strong element of happiness. It's measured with one questions about it. What Bhutan and other countries do it as well is they have different domains of happiness. So it's not measuring how happy are you, but it looks at different things that we know are important and measures and takes indicators of them. So, for example, such as education, community spirit, environment, culture. What it does is it tries to track each of these things, because we know from the happiness research is that this is what generally causes people to indicate that they have, fulfilling lives. Was that too much? Do you want me to go over anything?
No, that was great. That was great.
Christopher, I have a hot take, right? I was talking to my friend a few days ago, and it came to mind that I had a similar experience when I was in Latin America. And my hot take is that because the political structure is very unstable in Latin America, like a generalization, of course, but less stable than, say, in Europe, and because, say, violence is maybe a bit higher, they don't bank on the future as much as we do. And they kind of, when they have a party, they really do have a party. They really seize the day, seize that moment. When they have a meal, they really seize that. Whereas I can't help but think that often in the West, this is nice, but I'm really looking forward to next week. That party will be good next week, or this gig next week, or this will be a good, I'm looking forward to this conference or something. I often feel, or what I experienced was that when things were happening in Latin America, like people were just there expressing themselves and really, making the most of it, of the present.
The hot take, eh? So more just like being in the moment, like present with what's happening, rather than going, I'm pretty miserable now, but next week, I'll be doing that thing. When we get to that next week, we're still thinking about the next thing, because that's like we're kind of future thinking. I think that kind of speaks to, as I experienced it, I do feel like there's more presence. People are more present and available, whereas I do feel like we're more in our minds sometimes. We're thinking, and we're not really present, admiring the cool breeze, the trees, the birds, everything that's going on in the moment. We're often in our minds thinking about something or other, past, future, or whatever. But I did get that feeling of when it's happening, and they're there, and we're here. And that's kind of all that matters. I don't think that is all that matters, but it's nice that they can deepen into that and still be that, because I think the quality of life for some people there is quite nice, and I think part of that comes from living in the moment, and they feel a little bit more connected. It's almost like they haven't lost that connection that a child has, a little baby has, when it's just fully in touch with its emotions, or they've lost it less, would I say? And there's a lot to be, there's a lot of inspiration that I've drawn from that.
Christopher, I just want to get back as well. We were talking about the countries and the index and the league tables. There's something really, really interesting when you kind of get into that kind of that research area is what's linked with those league tables is then the happiness suicide paradox, which I think maybe Jim brought my attention to, or if not, it was someone else. But I couldn't get my head around it to start with, that the happiest countries kind of have these really high levels of suicide. And then I read the paper on them, and it kind of, I mean, I might be butchering it here, but the conclusion was something along the lines of, because they're so happy, generally speaking, they feel individually, they kind of feel a pressure to keep up that happy image. And so that kind of suppresses their emotions. And then therefore, in the worst circumstances and worst scenarios, leads to these high suicide rates. I was wondering if you could kind of talk more about that, because I think it's something that maybe goes kind of a little bit unnoticed, but it's something that's so, it's paradoxical, but it was also so interesting. And I'm sure you have kind of a good take on it, and much more research and learn to take than mine anyway.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think like what I've heard when people are talking about happiness and go, oh yeah, Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries, yeah, they're happiest. And then someone always like poo-poos that by going, oh, well, they have a really high suicide rate, as if that completely undermines, that idea of happiness. And, it's, I guess that's a lot of kind of, because it's nice to protect what we believe to be the good life. Therefore, they can't have a better life than I have because, the suicide rate's high, and it prevents me from then learning about that and going, oh, why are they happy? Oh, okay, yeah, suicide.
Yeah.
So I think the suicide thing is a very important thing, and as well as happiness. But what I see them as is just indicators of something. I don't think we should just measure, how happy people are, right? Because there's lots of other elements. I think we should measure all types of happiness as well as people's mental health, and look at them not as like, well, okay, that's good, therefore we don't need to do anything, but look at it more as a kind of complete picture. Oh, okay, people are generally registering, a lot of happiness in this country, kind of in a more nuanced kind of like pause and breathe type way, as I was talking about earlier. Go, oh, they're registering a lot of happiness, but suicide is really high. Oh, why is that? And look at it more as a kind of inquiry rather than going, haha, we're the happiest, and not really caring that people are, taking their own life. So I think we need to listen to all of these aspects. And, I mean, I don't know why that is the case. What I think is important is to just stay aware and appreciate that those are the situations. I mean, so, the incidence of mental illness is a lot higher than it was, partly because, the way we measure it and the way we record it and the way we talk about it and admit it is, more so. And we need to build in all of these considerations really, and look at it more in a kind of holistic way, which, at the moment I'm like, okay, happiness is a good thing to be looking at. It's better than, happiness in the hedonic or evaluative sense is okay. It's better than just focusing only on the economy. But as I see it, it's like, well, all of those things matter. There's not, a lot of my research was on how, the economy affects people's mental health and well-being and happiness, right? And a lot of my conclusions are that, we don't need to keep continuously striving and chasing. But at the same time, the economy has a role. It is important. And when people become unemployed, there are problems. It can create a lot of difficulty for that individual. Yet the way we deal with it is if it's an individual's problem and not being productive and blaming them rather than going, okay, how can we bring that person back into society so that they can live a more fulfilling life, as well as, we can live a more fulfilling life, which is one of not blame and judgment. So for me, it's the kind of looking at things holistically, and being more compassionate.
You say, yeah.
Yeah.
Jim loves that word. Absolutely loves that word.
My favorite word, Christopher.
I've used it at least three times.
That will go on his tombstone. That will go on his tombstone when he passes on. Nice. Holistic.
Okay, cool. So I've used it a few times there, so I'll try not to use it again.
No, keep on using it, Christopher. You're more than welcome to use that word. Just before we let you go, Christopher, I wanted to ask, do you think that your worries have changed since you came home from the trip? For instance, myself personally, I've noticed that my worries maybe 12 months ago about the future are a lot more different than my worries now. My worries a year ago was more about, would people consider me to be a failure? And my worries now are more, am I not going to listen to myself? Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, did you have a similar change, or did you already? Yeah, talk me through that.
Yeah, interesting question. Um, I think, to be honest, I'd say that my worries are pretty much just the same. Where am I going to sleep tonight? Have I got enough to get food? I guess they're more raw. I feel like on a bicycle, it's like, you're dealing with like it's just know bare basic physical needs really. A lot
Hmm.
of the time, where am I going to sleep tonight? You know, what am I going to eat? Which is really refreshing, I would say. But being back now, I guess like the worries are still there. I would say, um, but I just react less to them.
Okay.
I go,
You
that's
like
just a
pay them
worry.
less mind.
Yeah, a little bit. I just, I kind of, there's a sweetness to those anxieties and those fears. They're coming from somewhere. Yeah, I try and acknowledge them, and then I go, okay, how much do I really need to pay attention to these right now? So I'm not going to push them away. They're there. I'm going to cherish them and listen to them, but just not react to them. Really, I suppose.
Mm.
Um, I mean, it is quite a when you're dealing with that kind of bare basic survival stuff. Where am I going to sleep? And that's how it has been for me for quite some time. Really, it kind of makes some of the worries kind of inconsequential, I think.
Yeah.
But I kind of look at it sometimes. I'm fairly anxious prone, to be honest. It's
Okay.
kind of always been that way. I see how the society kind of fosters that a little bit,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
less inclined to feed into that as much as I was. But I mean, if there's no anxiety in my life, like no worries, then I'll worry about that basically. So it's almost like what I feel
Yeah.
is like there's like Christopher's got a fixed amount of worry, and he's going to attribute it to whatever's around. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it certainly feels like something that I just worry about stuff, and I pay not try to
Interesting.
not take not too much heed to it really. But I don't know it's difficult, eh? Being human.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Has the trip helped you trust the process more?
Oh
Like
yeah,
the trust,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like, were there times on the trip where you thought, "Oh, why didn't I just go home? This is a bit silly, or this is a bit dangerous, or this," and there was
yeah.
an overriding. You just have to, no, I just trust this. Just the right.
At the time, I wasn't, but I think when you go through some of the challenges that I did experience, you realize, oh wow, there's a way out of this. There's no has to, needs to. It just is, and this is what I'm dealing with. Okay, I'm bringing myself
Mm,
fully to it. And some of the situations I got myself into, I had to fully be in because there's no choice. You got a dog biting your leg, and you're like, okay, cool, this is happening. Um, and
yeah.
you deal with that, and it's pretty terrifying. It was like scary at times,
Mm,
but I stuck with it, and reached out to people. Hey, can you help? And people came, and I didn't have to
mm,
do that before. So I'm like, okay, there's something that came out of this that was really beautiful, um, and other things where I'm just like just lonely and cold and wet. Cycling up the west coast of the Americas, getting closer and closer to Canada, getting colder and wetter. And I'm like, wow, I really want to get home now.
mm,
But then magical stuff happened, which kind of encouraged me to keep going.
mm,
Serendipitously so. It just felt like almost like fated. And I'm not really, into that kind of way of thinking, I suppose, but it
mhm.
almost just felt too good to have worked out that way. And as I'm writing my book about it at the moment, I'm just like, wow, this is interesting how it all worked out. But at the same time, I could have had another experience and it would have been another outcome and it would have been so perfect as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, yeah, yeah, there's things I'd like to achieve and be in my life, but, I let go of them because it'll be okay. What's the worst that can happen, really?
Hakuna Matata is my favorite Disney movie once proclaimed. Um, Christopher, I'll just like to leave it there because I think we could go on for ages, but it's been really interesting. But before we do let you go, we're gonna get you to tell us how you keep your shit together, which I think will be very interesting coming from someone like yourself traveling all over the world. But before we let you do that, we'll just give you time to think by playing the jingle, and then you can let us know your top
Top
secret
secret
tips.
tips for keeping my shit together. Right. Okay, cool.
Okay, Christopher, whenever you're ready, take it away.
For my keeping my shit together tips. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting actually. So, I rode around the world on my bicycle, learned a lot of stuff, and then I'm suddenly faced with like writing a book. And before this lockdown came, I was actually quite isolated anyway, like looking after dogs in the middle of nowhere. And as I was writing my book, like I realized that a lot of the lessons I learned from my travels apply anywhere. And I guess similar kind of thing, whatever we do, meeting those core needs. So at the moment, I guess what really serves me is the idea of like planning, purpose, and people. And I'll deepen into that a little bit. So the idea, like now in lockdown, like, it's a bit all over the place. What are we doing with our days? Like just building routine into our days and our life is like hugely supportive, because when we don't have that, it makes the world feel quite scary and uncertain. So it kind of really holds us together in a really nice way. But that's not to say we should be so focused on that. Sometimes if we're feeling pretty bad, just let go of that, and that's okay. And then I guess the other one is purpose, like filling our days with purpose. What is it I'm really here to do? And trying to connect day in, day out with the things that really matter to me. And I guess a lot of that involves taking the time to understand what's important to us. So most of my mornings at the moment, whilst under lockdown, are basically spent writing my book, doing purposeful things. And then the other one is people. So the idea of creating connections with people, checking in with people, reaching out for support if we need it. Like our relationships with people, are the most fundamental contribution to our happiness. But in our pursuit of the things, we forget about that. And I guess for me, taking care of people also takes care of the purpose as well. Because for me, what I've realized is that when I'm helping other people, even if it's quite removed, like writing a book, I hope it inspires someone, or my journey inspires someone.
For sure.
It's quite removed, but it's connected to people, and kind of creating a better world for ourselves. So yeah, that's my keeping my shit down stuff, planning.
Perfect. Was that the three P's?
Three Ps.
Planning, purpose, and people.
That's how I'm pitching it. I kind of wrote this about a couple of weeks ago because someone wanted some tips for kind of lockdown.
Do you have a pattern for that, Christopher?
No, I don't. Anyone can use it. I'm happy with that. And the other thing though is be compassionate. I think. Like sometimes we won't plan our days. It'll go completely off kilter. We won't feel like things are purposeful. And we won't get any connection with people, and we might feel pretty rough. That's okay too. Right. So, sometimes we can't be all of that we need to be or want to be, and it's okay. Let that go, and be compassionate. And also, I guess, compassionate to other people is that, we're all doing our best with what we have and know, right?
Yeah.
100%. Great stuff. Do you want to? I know you have your blog and maybe your social media channels. Do you want to just give a little plug just so people who maybe listen to this and kind of want to read some of the articles that Jim and I have read and follow your story a bit closely, so that they can find you? Just want to share where your blog is and where they can find you?
Yeah, so I have a WordPress blog called Adventures in Happiness. And I started that about 4 or 5 years ago when I was still an academic trying to implement research into my life. I might be changing that soon to Journey for Happiness, which might be the title for a book I'm writing based on the journey and my experiences. But I'm not, it depends. I'm trying to get a publisher, and it depends what name we go with for the book title. I use Twitter, and that's at Dr. Happy Boyce, I think it is. Maybe a Facebook page or something like that. But, people want to get in contact, feel free.
Perfect. And we'll be sure to share, once that book is published, we'll be sure to share it on our social media as well, so people can buy it. I'm sure we'll be one of the first orders as well. Great stuff, Christopher. It's been really interesting conversation, and thanks so much for giving us the time.
Thanks so much.
It's been really insightful. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like, rate, subscribe, and pass on to anyone who you think may enjoy this conversation as well, and may want to learn a bit more about happiness. But in the meantime, keep safe. Bye.